Okay, so on to the first session, which is going to be, I am going to be talking to Brian Glazier, who is the Chief Talent and Learning Officer at Google. And Brian is not here today, but he's beaming in through the magic of technology, and hopefully we should have him up on the screen at any moment, he says, looking anxiously at the screen. Here we go. Excellent. What's the best way for me to do this? Okay. Brian, hello. Can you hear us?
Everybody.
Hey, sorry. Brian, we just missed you there. Can you just say hello again?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Fantastic. I can hear you loud and clear. How are you doing?
Well, I'm fine. I think the reason why we're having issues, Zoom is a competitor of Google's. I'm calling in on Google technology, but I see this as a Zoom link, so I'm hoping it lasts.
Well, I will not comment on that, Brian, but it's lovely to have you with us today. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Thank you.
So the topic of conversation today with Brian is going to be about complexity in the modern world and how managers can kind of handle that. And I wanted Brian to start by asking about how you define complexity and how you think about it at Google, and also whether the modern world is at a kind of unusually complex point at the moment. I mean, if you think about the 1970s, that was a decade where we faced energy crisis, geopolitical tensions, soaring inflation, unions brought whole economies to a halt. And so is today more complex than kind of previous decades?
Thanks, Guy. Yeah, it's a great question, and again, thank you all so much for having me here. I'm super excited to join you, even though I'm virtual. It sounds like an amazing lineup. I also think the cocktail hour is going to be brilliant, from what I understand. So next time I'll be there in person, I hope. Yeah, would love to share a little bit more on my thoughts about the complexity topic. I mean, it's no surprise here to anyone, I'm sure, that leading in complexity has become sort of an absolute essential skill, given how quickly our world is changing. I was just reflecting on the learning and development offerings that we provided to our Googlers prior to COVID. Most of the topics that were more advanced are now table stakes. So everything that we thought was higher order development is now foundational. For example, some of the courses we provide our executives are being provided to all 30,000 managers. So I would say the complexity factor has increased, and we're doing a lot to try to think about ways to make progress in these uncertain times. At Google, we're grappling with lots of different questions. How do we reimagine the success of our core business when a recession may be on the horizon? We're onboarding 60,000 people a year in a hybrid environment. That's a first time ever sort of situation. How do we manage the constantly evolving geopolitical issues that you mentioned, Guy, the data privacy regulations that directly affect our business? So I would say, decades before this have definitely experienced high levels of complexity, but I think we're definitely at a peak.
That's super interesting. And so, Brian, I mean, if your role is to kind of train and prepare managers and executives for how to deal with complexity. If you think about the business leaders that you think are really good at this, could you just tell us a bit about what characteristics you think they have in common? What are the kind of patterns? What are the trends?
Yeah, I think it's important to start first off by talking about what we mean by complexity. So, I found the best way to get our head around it, or leaders' heads around it, is to differentiate that which is complex versus that which is complicated. And the dangers we see among leaders is that they sometimes treat both the same. With a complicated problem, the knowledge and know-how, it already exists. It's not to say that complicated problems are easy, right? Putting a human on the moon is not an easy task, but it can be done with current know-how, expertise, and experience. Complex problems are different. The answers are far less obvious, and sometimes we don't even know what we're actually solving for. The problem itself isn't clear. So I know many of us have been talking about well-being recently through COVID. Even in Google's early days, this is a topic that we've cared deeply. We've cared deeply about. We were brilliant at throwing a technical engineering solution at the challenge. We extended all meetings by 5 minutes, thinking that people would spend 5 minutes between meetings, regrouping and recovering. That didn't work. People just spend the extra 5 minutes talking to their fellow Googler, and they're still late for their next meeting. So it's a great example of a technical solution, a complicated solution, if you will, to a complex challenge. So making the distinction between those two, I think, is first and foremost the most important step.
That's fascinating. Brian, what did you end up doing to improve well-being? What was the end solution if it wasn't putting 5 minutes in between meetings?
We've done a lot of other things,
yeah.
but we've done a lot of other things. But the difference is that we started to talk to people first and foremost about what the drivers of well-being are and were, and from that we created a much more systemic set of solutions that actually started to address the problem. And we realized, depending on the role that you have, the geography you're in, your background, those sorts of things have different implications for the topic of well-being. So treating everyone the same was our first mistake. Being a Black Noogler, we call new Googlers here, onboarding into this system is very different than a more long tenured executive who grew up here and just got promoted. So really understanding the different drivers based on different segments was the first step we took, and from that we've derived a number of solutions. I think you also asked me, Guy, I'm happy to talk about it. We can go, what do leaders do well? I'm happy to touch on that if it's useful, but also we'll leave it to you to let me know where you want to go.
Yeah. Do tell us. What do leaders do well? What should we all be trying to master?
So I think there are three things, after having done this work now for some time, that come to mind. The first thing that I like to talk about in terms of what leaders do well, they pick a direction, not a destination. So days of having, 3 to 5 year plans, of course, are really helpful, but we know, given the complexities of the world, those plans don't always stick. So really thinking about what you seek to achieve and learn more about, what you'd like to see in terms of results, but how you get there, we need to leave room for that. And so one thing we see leaders do is run experiments to see if they're getting more or less of what they want. So at Google, we're known to do reorgs all the time. We sort of blow things up from the center and expect to see outcomes that we're striving for. In fact, sometimes, believe it or not, that doesn't actually work. So what if, instead of reorging every 6 months, we took a few people and move them around and put them in different roles? Could this potentially be an experiment we run to see if we get more of what we're looking for? So this idea of picking a direction, not a destination, and running safe to fail experiments is one thing that leaders do particularly well who are complexity comfortable. Another thing that I've noticed is that people who thrive in complexity are really comfortable not knowing all the answers. If you're a very righteous person and you need to be right all the time and you're not willing to be wrong, you're likely not going to thrive in complexity. At Google, we've got thousands of really smart people, and they value precision and clarity. And the reality is, in complexity, you're never going to get a full picture of what's going on and what the solution looks like. And so being able to move from a place of advocacy, like I know what I'm talking about, I know what to do, to a place of inquiry and asking different questions about the problem is a really important leadership move. And then the third thing is to see the system, right? Really understanding the system that you're operating in. What are the attractors and the detractors in the system, and how do you start to think about taking the opportunity to address things that may not be front and center, but they may be flurrying around the edges. So a lot of things that leaders can do. Those are some of the things I've seen them do extremely well here.
That's super interesting. Okay, Brian, I think we've probably only got a kind of minute left or so. So I was just going to ask you whether you have any kind of parting advice for us before we let you get on with the rest of your day. How should we all be managing complexity in our own lives and businesses?
Okay, so one thing that I've learned is that listening to learn versus listening to be right in complexity is really important. More often than not, we're listening to win, right? Someone's talking about something and we're already formulating our response, waiting for the hook, waiting for that moment to share our perfect answer. So instead of doing that, one thing that you could try and emphasize is asking yourself, gosh, in this conversation, in this meeting, what happens if I'm wrong? How could I possibly be wrong in this circumstance? What happens if someone's, someone's more right than I am, holding back and deriving certainty, and instead of listening, can be a problem. So I think that would be the one thing I would say more than anything that could potentially lead to different outcomes.
Wonderful. That's fascinating. Wonderful. Well, Brian, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for coming to speak and share your knowledge with us today. We really appreciate it. And hopefully next
Have a
time,
great meeting.
yeah, next time
Thanks, guys.
we'll see you here for the cocktails.
Perfect. Thank you. Take care.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.